So now we're going to take some time, we're going to look at inventory turnover. The idea is, how often does your inventory turn over in your business? The reason you might want to look at this is because you'd want to see whether or not you have inventory that's sitting around for 6 months before it gets sold. Keep in mind that if you remember back to your inventory chapters, keeping inventory can be quite expensive. You've got to house it, you've got to take care of it, you've got to make sure it doesn't get stolen or damaged. You've got the possibility of inventory becoming obsolete or losing its value over time. So inventory turning over in your business is something that is definitely desirable. So the more inventory turnover you have, the better your business is being run, because you want to run your business with the least amount of inventory as possible. Reaching back to those just-in-time chapters, or rather reaching forward, because I don't think we haven't talked about that yet, but when we start discussing just-in-time, you'll see where inventory, keeping a low amount of inventory, is actually beneficial to a company. So the calculation is as it shows here: cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. So let's move forward a minute. Alright, so again we're looking at the same business, and we're looking at inventory. As I said, it was cost of goods sold, right? That's your cost of goods sold for the inventory. This year, $1,043,000 divided by average inventory. Okay, so if you're not given the average inventory balance, you're going to look at the beginning of the year's inventory amount, the end of the year's inventory amount, add them together, and then divide them by 2. Okay, that's going to be your denominator. So what you've got here is $1,043,000 divided by 273,500. And what that gives you is a ratio of 3.8. So what they're saying here is that your inventory is turning over 3.8 times during the year. Alright, so that's a good thing. And again, you don't know if that's a good number if you're just looking at it by itself, but if you're looking at it in comparison to the prior year, last year it looks like inventory only turned over 2.8 times, whereas this time it turned over an entire one more cycle. Alright, so your inventory is turning over more frequently. Maybe you're keeping less of it on hand, or maybe you're just selling that much more that your inventory is turning over more quickly. You would expect to see this, especially if you remember back, we were looking at the sales numbers, and sales increased. So inventory turning over shouldn't be too much of a surprise to us. It would be strange if that number went down, right? Okay, so the higher the number, the more desirable here. Alright. The next item is also an inventory item. It's number of days sales and inventory. So the idea is, how long does it take to buy inventory, sell it, and then replace it again? How many days do you have inventory on hand? How many days does your average inventory item sit on your floor before you're able to sell it and replace it again? So the calculation is average inventory divided by average daily cost of goods sold. If you realize, this is the same type of equation as number of days of receivables, number of days that receivables is in-house. You do the same kind of thing. You take the cost of goods sold divided by 365 days to get you to your average daily cost of goods sold. So let's move forward into the actual calculation. So you've got average inventory, which again, if you don't know those numbers, it's the beginning of the year plus the end of the year divided by 2. Gives you the average daily cost of goods sold here. Well, I'm sorry, that's your average inventory, and your average daily cost of goods sold is the cost of goods sold divided by 365 days. What this is going to look like is the number of days sales that are in inventory is, in 2012, you've got them in 95.7 days you've got inventory in-house. Whereas in 2011 you had 132 days that the inventory was sitting in-house. That means inventory would, from the time you bought it to selling it to replace it, was 132 days for any individual item. Alright, that's kind of a long time for something to sit in inventory. Well, we're doing a much better job now. Inventory is only sitting in-house about 95 days. Alright, so that's what you're looking at in this calculation. Okay, the next set of calculations here, the next set of financial ratios. The ratio of fixed assets to long-term liabilities. Now this is a solvency equation, so how solvent is the business? This is a ratio that might be used for somebody looking to loan a business money as a long-term investment. So if a bank was looking at 10-year or 20-year loan, this is the type of calculation they'd be looking to. What it is you're trying to say, how many fixed assets do you have? And your fixed assets, if you remember, are like your long-term assets, your buildings, your equipment, things like that. So how many of those long-term fixed assets do you have in comparison to your long-term liabilities? All right, so let's move into numbers. So if you look back to that Lincoln Company's information from several slides ago, you would see that total fixed assets, and again we're going to look at 2012, are $444,500, and our long-term liabilities are $100,000. So what we're saying here is you've got a 4.4 ratio. That 4.4 ratio means that you've got $4.40 of every long-term asset to every dollar of long-term liability. So at the end of the day, if push came to shove, and you had to sell off all of those assets in order to pay off your long-term liabilities, you would have enough money to do so, and then you'd even have more than that. All right, that's what you're really looking at here, because if you're looking to loan this business money from a long-term perspective, you want to make sure that they don't have a tremendous amount of long-term liabilities, because in 20 years, who's going to say if they're going to be solvent enough to be able to pay that back? All right, so this is, again, this is a good calculation for those long-term loans. All right, the next one we're going to look at is the ratio of liabilities to stockholders' equity. So you know that a business gets its assets from one of two ways. They either have their assets from still owing the money, a liability. So that what I mean by that is if you buy a building, you might have the building for an asset, but you also have the liability of a mortgage attached to that building. Or do you get your money from you running your business from stockholders' equity, which is retained earnings, right? Which is where your net income gets closed out to. So really, it's kind of like, where is your money coming from? So what we're looking at here is you've got total liabilities of $310,000 and total stockholders' equity of $829,000. So what they're saying when you do this math here, the ratio of liabilities to stockholders' equity, you're saying that you have 40 cents of every liability to every dollar of stockholders' equity. So what you're saying here is the majority of your items are going to be the majority of your financing for your business is coming from stockholders' equity, from retained earnings, from the business's own money. So the higher this number, the worse situation you're in. You want this number to be lower because you want your liabilities, you want the money to run your business to be coming from your business itself, your stockholders' equity, not from loans. Okay, number